What is up, duelists? I have a Dracotail deck list today because I did go to locals yesterday and dabbled in Justice Hunters format. It was my first time entering a tournament in Justice Hunters format, and I want to talk about my experience because it was really fun. Now, I will say it's nothing too crazy about the deck list because it was just my first time dabbling around in the format, and I wanted to try and see how the deck works and how it flows. I didn't want to do any crazy like experiments. So I want to focus more on what I learned from locals and like how I expected the deck to perform and then how it actually performed. Now, I was able to win locals with Dracotail, and I also pulled an ulti for the first time in a long time, which is really cool. But let's go ahead and take a look at the Dracotail deck that I played. Most importantly, I want to talk about like why I put the cards in the deck and then why, like how they actually performed. So first things first, for the Dracotails, it's 3 Lucius, 3 Phimenas, 3 Mululus. Most Dracotails, or all Dracotail lists I've seen, will play these at max because one of the most important part of playing Dracotail is, of course, seeing Dracotail names to fuse with, because otherwise you cannot play the game. And that's why I also decided to play more copies of the big ones, quote unquote, which is 2 Dracotail Pan and 2 Dracotail Urgula. I decided to go 2 and 2 because I just didn't want to draw duplicates, and I think both of these are equally important, at least in theory, and I did kind of felt fine with this. Unironically, I even felt like I wanted more sometimes because some of my worst hands were the ones where I just didn't have a Dracotail. For reference, I resolved Phimena to fuse on the opponent's turn 0 times, unfortunately, at locals, because every time I drew it, I just didn't have another Dracotail. I drew it a couple of times, but I just had no Dracotail with it, which was annoying to me. I'll talk about some of the directions that I could see this deck go in the future once I've showed you the list, because there's some things I've noticed while playing the deck. So that's that. So that's the Dracotail names. For the Dracotail spells, of course, you're going to have 3 Rahu, 3 Ketu, and then 1 Flame and 1 Horn. I drew Horn like it was my freaking job, and somehow it was always Horn. It was never Flame. I've drawn Horn like 6 times in 4 rounds or something, especially going second. I lost 3 out of 4 dice rolls, which honestly, the format did not feel very dice rolly, which was super nice. It's not as bad if you're drawing one of the trap cards, as long as you can play. Honestly, the spell cards are awkward in this deck because you do really want to draw them because they are your starters. However, whenever you draw the spell cards, it makes your main deck monster effects to set the cards a lot less valuable because you've already gone through them. When I go K2 Dracotail going second and I fuse away like 2 Dracotails from my hand, setting 2 cards with them does not actually add that much to my turn because I've already used K2. So I've noticed that like sometimes, as long as I had a way to fuse, I preferred not having these in my hand because then I fuse away Dracotails and they just get me more plays, which was really powerful. And I'll talk about that in a second on what I would do with that conclusion about the deck. I played King of the Swamp and Poly. This was okay for me. It was just something I've been wanting to try in the deck because I thought like it seemed really cool to be able to go into some different fusions from the extra deck. I made Dragoon once. I honestly don't think it matters that much that you can go into some fancy fusions with this. I think it's mostly just about having more ways to fuse in the deck. And most importantly, it is a monster card. So even if you don't have a second Poly in your deck to search with another King of the Swamp, it's just being able to fuse with it for future fusion summons but that you add back with Arthalion, I think is relevant. It was okay. It's about Guardian Chimera. Oh, you're gonna be disappointed when I show you my extra deck. And here is 2 cards that I don't know if you should play, but I was never gonna go to a tournament with this deck for the first time without these cards, and those are Shaddoll Beast and Cap Shell. Now hear me out, okay? Both of these cards say draw a card, which is all I have for you. I will say I played Shaddoll Beast. There's no Winda in my extra deck because there's just 1 Shaddoll Beast in my deck. I have no way to search it, no way to do anything with it. I did not feel like it was worth including a Winda in the extra deck. The plan with both of these, because Cap Shell is the same thing. If it's sent to the grave for a fusion summon, you draw a card. You want to fuse these away for Arthalion and then add them back and draw a free card over and over and over again, right? Like you just send these as extra materials from your hand. They replace themselves and you get them back. You just like accumulate card advantage over over time if you have one of these, or ideally both, which I thought was cool. I didn't want to go like all in on this concept. I didn't want to play like multiple of each of these, because if you draw these without a way to fuse, of course they don't do anything. I didn't like feel comfortable playing a bunch of these because I feel like it's already a problem. Like you can't fuse. But like I said earlier, sometimes the main deck Dracotail names, like the graveyard effects, they become redundant. Like if you can play and if you can fuse in this deck, I felt like you get to a bunch of fusion summons per turn. Like you can do a fusion summon with 5 mana, with Mululu, with Rahu, and maybe even with K2 if you're going second, or your opponent plays on your turn, which is 4 fusion summons a turn, hypothetically. But like, fusion summoning away Dracotails 4 times in a turn is not really worth it. You don't get enough value out of setting all of those like spells over and over again. So I wanted some other fusion material that I could use and accumulate some card advantage with. So that was a cool idea in my book. And I liked these whenever I drew them. I didn't draw them often because they're just one-offs each. But whenever I did do some stuff with these felt nice. They felt like I was able to maintain a lot of card advantage and draw into some non-engine with. Speaking of non-engine, I played 3 Fuvas, no Perulias. I don't think Perulia is like that great in the current format. It still makes sense to play Perulia in this deck in particular because you can just fuse it away. But I was a little too worried about like drawing Perulia and no way to fuse it, which did happen with Fuva a couple of times. But Fuva I think is really good in this format, so I played Fuva. Nib was my favorite card in the deck yesterday because it just has awesome synergy with Dracotail. Of course, going second, if it's your only hand trap in the current format, it's not always great. I did play against a Vanquish Soul Canine. They lost to just Nibiru, which I think was preventable if they played the line a little safer, but they decided to risk it and then they got punished by the Nib. But in general, this deck just can do a lot of cool things with Nibiru because you can add it back from your graveyard with Arthalion. You can return it back to your hand from the field even with Dracotail Horn, which is really neat. And you can even bounce it back to your hand with like something like a Typhon sometimes. There was one game where I considered that. And then it's just 3 Ash and 3 Valor. I didn't want to go crazy on the hand traps because I just don't feel like hand traps are that great this format. I rather wanted some more engines and way to fuse, but I really like these 2. Valor in particular, I think makes sense in this deck because it's not once per turn, so you can loop it with Arthalion, which I think is cool. In general, I think the pairing of Valor plus Nip is pretty strong this format. Especially the Canine engine has great ways to play around Nibiru by just making a Ripper. But if you can Valor the Ripper, force them to use the negate, and then nib them later, I think that is actually a quite strong play. And then Ash just like as a generically strong card. I will say Ash was not great for me. Overall, it didn't feel like it had insanely high impact. It was never bad. It was just like all right, but I just wanted to play it because you can like Ash a Charmy on your first turn or Ash an Azuna on your first turn and then still add it back with Arthalion, which similar to Valor, that can be really nice. Of course, you want to play monster non-engine in this deck because you can recycle it and it makes a lot of sense. The last card in my deck was 1 Talents, which I think is really cool in this deck. I like drawing cards. I like being able to maintain card advantage if I get Ashed on my only starter. I know it's a spell that when you go second, you can't really make great use of it to fuse with 5 mana, but like I think the way I interpreted this format was like that most decks don't actually make like crazy auto win boards when they're going first, and you can actually play into stuff. And I do really like talents in these kind of formats because it's like if I maybe Valor my opponent once on like some choke point and I have a talents to recover the card advantage that I lost from the effect Valor, it helps me play into board. Sometimes you can take, sometimes going first you can afford to look into their hand, but like it was mostly there to just draw extra cards to maintain card advantage because this deck, it always needs to maintain some cards in hand. It's a little bit similar to Vanquish Soul in that regard, that like once you run out of monsters in hand, you just cannot really fuse anymore. Like you need to be worried about your hand size. The extra deck is just something where I didn't know exactly what to do because I haven't entered a tournament with this deck before. So I played 3 Arthalions, which I would always recommend playing at 3. I only played 1 Gulamel because I was running into some space issues when I was building it. Like I went into building this deck with the, like I guess I was expecting there to be infinite space in my extra deck, but then I realized there's like a lot of options that you can play. And I wasn't sure which ones actually come up because it was my first time entering a tournament with it. So I just tried to fit as many as possible so I wouldn't miss anything. Honestly, it was fine, but I would like to play 2 of this. I played Mysterion and Secretarion. I made these 0 times, which honestly is due to me not being super familiar with the deck yet. One of the key things with these is that like the ways you have to fuse are like different. They all have different restrictions. Like for example, Mululu and Rahu force you to fusion summon a Dracotail, and they also both lock you into fusions for the rest of the turn. So I was trying to use these last. Usually I was trying to do these first because they don't lock you, so that I could still make like seals and stuff like that. But as a result of that, when I was doing these first, I was usually making Arthalion and Gulamel first, and then I was left with Rahu and Mululu if I wanted to make more fusions. And then I was like, well, now I can't make these 2 anymore. I could have sequenced things better. That's why I didn't make these at all, is what I'm trying to say. I think these 2 are very good, but I just didn't see the lines, basically, because I've played the deck for the first time. Something that I did summon a couple times, though, was Filly Outrageous. That card seems pretty nice to me because the deck otherwise has no way to interact with the graveyard, and being able to banish stuff with it was really cool. This deck, of course, because the entire deck is built around graveyard effects, will never have a good time into Izuna and Lupus. And so banishing Lupus with this from the graveyard was really nice for me. I played Dragoon. I made it once. I don't know how I feel about the King of the Swamp package. I feel like it's not worth wasting extra deck space on these niche options. Like Dragoon, I summoned it. It didn't feel like it mattered that much when I summoned it. It wasn't bad. It was good. It wasn't necessary. And I honestly think you could just play King of the Swamp without any fancy targets for it, or you could just like play Cartesia instead. I haven't tried that yet, but I think Cartesia is also pretty good. I played Tyrant because I was a little scared of running out of trap cards in a grind game. If you ever put one trap in the graveyard and then the other one gets ashed, you're stuck with both traps in the grave. You can't get them back. So in theory, you can make Tyrant in this situation because King of the Swamp counts as a Blue Eyes White Dragon, and then you fuse another dragon, and then you reset one of the traps, which I never did, but I liked it in theory. And that's it with the fusions. No Guardian Chimera, which was probably the 16th card that I would have played. I probably would have cut one of these 2 for Guardian Chimera. A Spirit, so you can turn your normal summon into a dragon. I think this is a pretty known concept for this deck at this point. I did try to end on Seals whenever possible, because I think Seals is a phenomenal endboard piece in this deck, because you can summon Mululu on the opponent's turn to then fuse. Artemis, to turn your spellcaster into a link that can be used for SP Little Knight. So of course, alongside these 2, SP and Seals. I valued the link options a little bit more than extra fusion options. I did think all of this was really nice, and this came up. Cross Sheep is here. It gives you a follow-up even if you run out of Dracotail monsters. I think it was something that Jesse mentioned in his deck profile, where it's like sometimes you have like a Nibiru on the board and you draw like an Ash Blossom for a turn, and you're like, okay, well, I don't have access to Dracotail, but actually you do, because you can normal summon the hand trap. You make Cross Sheep because 2 monsters were sent to the graveyard at the same time. You can bring back the fusions, you put them where Cross Sheep points, and then Cross Sheep brings back your engine. And I played 1 Typhon, which for the grindy nature of this deck, Typhon was amazing for me. Like, I think I underestimated even the ability of this deck to play into boards. Like, this deck plays into boards really well as long as you can resolve an effect to fuse, because you just get like so many cards out of one effect to fuse. And specifically going second, if you try to play without Rahu in the beginning by resolving K2, because K2 is basically Rahu but better when you're going second, and it does not lock you, you are still free to go for SP or Typhon, which I thought was really, really good. So that's the extra deck. I think moving forward, I would play all of these again for sure. I would probably replace these 2. And what you replace these with, I think, depends on what direction you take the main deck. I mean, of course, if you play the Poly, you can consider Guardian Chimera. If you don't play the Poly, you definitely play a second Gulamel, I think. And then the other one, I wouldn't know right now what you would make. All right, that's the extra deck. The side deck I kept pretty straightforward. It's all monsters because I didn't want to side deck any spells for the monster deck. I played 3 Fenrirs for going first. It's, I think, an awesome card in this format. When I was considering main decking this, honestly, but I was a little too scared of like having a Nibiru on my board or fusing with Phimena when I'm going second and not being able to summon Fenrir. But I think Fenrir is awesome. So it's an extra interruption for a deck that is already kind of grindy and doesn't make like super unfair boards. It maintains card advantage in your hand because it searches another Fenrir, which is nice. That's something you can just fuse away for an Arthalion to add a different card from your graveyard to your hand is really good. It covers for some of your opponent's hand traps, like when your opponent has Izuna, It covers for Retaliating Sea, which I don't think many people play, but it helps. And it also covers for like 5 mana because you then just banish their body, which is still really good. This is always what I side in over the Fuvalos, basically. 3 Lancias because I wasn't sure if anyone was going to still play Malice, and I really like the idea of being able to add back Lancia over and over again against Malice. Of course, floodgating them every turn, which normally would be cringe, but because it's against Malice, it's good and funny. But mainly, I was also like, even if no one plays Malice, this card is still good against something like Crystron. I played Lancia to cover for Malice still, and Purulia to still cover for Ryzeal variations, because I wasn't sure how many people were actually going to play the new decks at locals, or if people still play the old stuff. Turns out a lot of people were playing the new decks at locals because everyone thinks Justice Hunter format is awesome. Like, there was a lot of people playing. Yeah, I saw Yami. There was Yami duelists, multiple Dracotail duelists, multiple Vanquish Soul K9 duelists. Like, it was great. I decided for Purulia over Droll because this deck likes drawing cards. I like drawing cards. I think this has like more applications in other matchups, whereas Droll would be very targeted for Ryzeal. I guess you can Droll Vanquish Soul K9. I'm not sure if I love that. I think I would rather just Purulia Vanquish Soul K9. Then I played 3 Bells. Bell in theory is pretty decent against both Yami and the mirror match. Against Yami, you can use it to counter their synchros when they are tagging out. You can Bell the Dracotail traps in the mirror match, which is really neat. And then because it cuts them off of their cycle, and you also stop them from drawing a card. Coincidentally, I played against Memento, and it's pretty good against Memento to beat Gatic or Memento Fusion. And then you knew I was going to put this card into this deck, right? Like, if any deck in the format can realistically play Phantasme right now, I'm going to play Phantasme. The only thing I would have liked is I would have liked to fit Bystials in here somewhere, because I love the idea of being recycling Bystials with Arstalion. I think that's awesome too. Especially Magnamood, because Magnamood can actually search like engine in this deck. Probably could have cut like one somewhere, like a 1 Bell or 1 Phantasme or 1 Purulia for a Magnamood. Or just fit the Magna in the main deck as well. So as you can tell, like, this is not, I understand this is not like a crazy deck build that I've made. You know, this is like a lot of the like standard-ish concepts that people have been doing in Dracotail now. I want to talk more about my experience with the deck rather than like why I built the deck the way I did, because I genuinely don't think this build is anything crazy. And while it was only locals, I still always think like the first time you actually play a deck is always the one where you learn a lot about it. Of course, there's still more to learn from me about Dracotail, but I think it was still an awesome experience. And I want to talk about some of the issues I faced, maybe some of the things that I could, maybe directions that I can see this deck going in the future, because I think this deck is still currently being played in a very standard fashion. There's still a lot of ways to explore it. Let's talk about some of the issues I faced. Unironically, and this might sound weird, but drawing K2 and Rahu in this deck feels a little bit awkward. Am I the only one? I know I'm not the only one who thinks that way, because Jesse said the same thing in his deck profile. What I mean by this is, of course, drawing them, you feel happy because you have a starter. What you realize very quickly is that when you resolve a Rahu to start your plays, the graveyard effects of your Dracotails will feel a lot less powerful, because you've already used one of the, like, basically you have 2 spells that you can set with the Dracotails to extend your plays on that turn, right? It's like I can set K2 and I can set Rahu to keep pushing. However, if you have already opened one, or worst case even both of those, you can only set 1 or 0 spells that you can still use to play on that turn, right? Because they're all once per turn, obviously, for very good reason, but like you won't get value this turn for those cards. Of course, you can set the trap cards then, but those will not help you extend. They won't help you push through things. Of course, you could argue like the deck, yeah, a 3rd spell would help so much. Of course it would. But I mean, this is already why I think like the 3rd trap is going to be a decently big deal. But here's the thing, right? My first thought when I walked out of locals and I thought about my deck on the way home, what if you cut these down a little bit? Which sounds really counterintuitive because they're great starters, don't get me wrong. But like, what if you find other ways to get things going and like fuse away and then set them from your deck so you don't draw them as often? Because your turns genuinely are better if you start fusing with other cards. But then I thought of a different thing, which was like, I still, even with the trap cards recycling your stuff, I still ran out of things to set in multiple games. I will say this might be due to me not being not playing the deck perfectly. Maybe I missed some ways to play things better and like finish games out quicker, but like I felt like some games were really close because I won like 1 or 2 games with 0 Dracotail spell traps in my deck. Literally, I was literally out of spell traps. I could not have used a single Dracotail graveyard effect in that game. If I hadn't won it on that turn, I was like out of things. Like I had nothing left when I won, right? And so I was like, okay, if I had played 1 less Rahu or 1 less K2, I would not have been able to win that game, you know? That got me thinking, because I was like, okay, maybe the future of this deck is like, maybe the future of this deck lies somewhere over 40 cards, because then you draw the trap cards less, which is awkward to draw the trap cards. You don't draw the spells as often, which as long as you keep the deck consistent, I think you're going to be fine over 40. The next issue that you face then is you might not draw enough Dracotails, because honestly, the hands where you don't draw a Dracotail are the worst hands. Like I've had this happen a couple times, and I played more Dracotails than standard, right? I already played an extra Urgula and an extra Pan. I think if you want to take this deck over 40, you probably would have to play 3 and 3, which I honestly don't think is unreasonable. I think these two, even though they don't start your plays, as long as you have a way to fuse, drawing these is still amazing, especially Urgula, because it's just like Urgula, I think, is by far the best one to fuse with on your first turn, because it retrieves a monster from your grave to your hand as well. So I think it's awesome. And Pan is obviously the best disruption. Of course, by going a little bit over 40, you're also going to reduce your chances to draw 5 mana. But I do think, like, while 5 mana on turn 0 is awesome, this deck, if built and played properly, I can imagine this deck playing into boards quite well. Even if you didn't 5 mana on their turn 0, I think you can still play into boards decently. You can maintain card advantage and all that. I think it could be a way to take this deck in the future. In regards to the Shaddoll package, I think it is interesting to play Shaddoll Beast in this deck. I liked the concept of Shaddoll Beast a lot. However, I honestly never felt like I needed to Winda lock my opponent. So I never felt the need to play more Shaddolls. If anything, you can play, because that's another way you can fix the problem of not getting enough value out of your Dracotail graveyard effects, is just fuse with other monsters, right? Like play other monsters that get you value when you fuse with them, right? And that is something that Shaddolls could provide. You could play more Shaddolls with the argument of, well, I can perform 4 fusion summons in a turn sometimes, or maybe even 5 if I draw King of the Swamp. Like, I can perform 5 fusion summons in a turn, which you don't always have to do, but like you can. I just don't have enough Dracotails to fuse with that get value, right? So you could think about playing alternative ways to fuse, like extra Shaddolls or whatever else there is, right? I think that is a possibility for this deck. In terms of King of the Swamp, my main takeaway from this tournament is you definitely need to play extra ways to fuse. I would not be happy with this deck if it wasn't for King of the Swamp. I think you need an extra way to fuse. It doesn't have to be King of the Swamp though. It could be Cartesia, maybe Patchwork, I don't know. You definitely need a way to fuse, 100%. I don't think you care that much that Cartesia is a normal summon. I think a lot of my hands I was fine without normal summoning the Lucius. I think that's okay. I think it's manageable. The hand traps in general felt good. I did not want to draw more hand traps necessarily. I felt like Nibiru was awesome. Puvalos is awesome. Valor felt decent, but I mainly played it for the being able to recycle it. I think Magnamood goes crazy in this deck. I would like to play Magnamood. Maybe I would play Magnamood over Talents or Magnamood like 41 or whatever. I think it's fine. But like being able to recycle Magnamood over and over again is awesome. The only issue is like with Magnamood, you have to like fuse it away from your field, which you cannot make a Dracotail fusion monster with a Magnamood on the board, because it's like Dracotails and monsters from the hand. So you'd have to make like Secretarion or Mysterion, but those are good still. So I could see Magnamood having a place in this deck, in particular because I think it's pretty decent against Yummy to just banish their stuff over and over again and keep adding it back to your hand. I just love the grindy aspect of the deck, so that's what I want to lean into. Another thing I quickly want to mention is an outlook to the future, because this deck has already announced support or received support in the OCG. From my experience, getting another main deck monster, even if I believe it's called Dracotail Frixel, even if Frixel is not amazing in terms of its effect, it does create follow-up, which I think like getting your monsters back from the graveyard is good in this deck. So I think Frixel is good. Just in general, having more Dracotail names is awesome. So I like that a lot about it, as well as I think getting a third trap is awesome. I think the third trap also being graveyard interaction that this deck normally doesn't really have, except for the Philia Rages, is very, very good. Of course, the problem is it's already kind of awkward to draw the trap cards in this deck. Like the trap cards are high quality cards, but they don't let you play. So especially going second, having a trap in your hand is weird. However, I think you definitely want to be playing the third trap because it gives more value to your graveyard effects. You have another thing you can set. I think that's awesome. With that, honestly, I would even more consider going over 40 cards. If I can add extra names to draw with a higher likelihood, I think I'd be more willing to go over 40 cards. Of course, then you have to do the math over and over again, like see how many, like what do you add? Do you maybe add an extra hand trap to make sure you still draw enough hand traps? Do you add another way to fuse so you don't open no way to fuse? Where the exact number is going to end up, I don't know, but I do think the future for this deck could be slightly over 40 cards to make sure you don't draw the trap cards as often, and you also actually don't want to draw these all the time because you then don't have value from your graveyard effects. That was my takeaway from this deck. Generally, I had an awesome time. Justice Hunters format is one of the most fun I've had playing the TCG in a long time. Even though I already enjoyed playing Vanquish Soul at Euros, that was already awesome. Justice Hunters format is something else. I honestly, if you had asked me last year around this, I always mention this in these discussions, I'm sorry, but if you had asked me like, how good do you think Yu-Gi-Oh is going to be in a year? If you had asked me that during Snake Eye, Tenpai, and Yubel format, I would not have expected it to be this good. I know they can turn things around, and I know they can make things better. I am impressed with how good it is now compared to what it was a year ago. I am so happy for Justice Hunters format. It's been great. It's been a blessing. And that goes for all the decks, by the way. It's also like I watched someone play Yummy a little bit at locals, and that also seemed awesome. There's like so many decisions to be made. Like even if Yummy builds and Vanquish Soul K9 builds are more standardized, the deck building portion is not that interesting, but the gameplay is great. Like I was playing this deck and I was seeing so many things I could probably improve the next time I play it. And I was watching other people play Vanquish Soul K9 and I was watching other people play Yummy, and I'm like, dude, this format has so much decision making in it. This format there's so much skill in this format. It's just awesome. I don't know what else to say. I think it's awesome. I want to play more TCG. I think once we're done with Master Duel Worlds, the focus of this channel is probably going to shift a decent amount, because I currently am planning to do the Worlds grind for the TCG next season. I'm already booked for like multiple regionals in September. I'm going to be, I know I've said this in the past, but I'm going to be seriously looking into more ways to make TCG content on stream as well. I've already looked into like potentially getting like a GoPro to film my locals, and then we can talk over my matches on stream and all that kind of stuff. It's just a mix of the TCG just being awesome right now, and then like I log into Master Duel and I get Malice comboed with Appaloosa, Link Decoder, Maxi Legal, Double Called by the Grave, Triple Talents. Because it's not just Maxi. There's a different philosophy that they apply to Master Duel than they do in the TCG, and I think it's like over time you really feel it. Like, because maybe the individual decisions you might think like are not that big of a deal. Like, oh well, Called by is at 1 in the TCG, it's at 2 in Master Duel. What's the huge difference? Like, okay, well, we have Baron in Master Duel, and we don't have it in TCG. Not that many decks play it at the moment, but it's just like the general philosophy of Master Duel is just something that I don't agree with that much. I still enjoy playing Master Duel, but it's just like, I think Master Duel is still great for what it is. I think it's awesome that it gives you a way to play Yu-Gi-Oh from home and all that kind of stuff. I don't think we're gonna move away from Master Duel completely. You know what? Let's stop doing this. Let's not direct too much negativity at Master Duel, because I genuinely think Master Duel it's good that it exists, and I think if people enjoy Master Duel, that's awesome. I don't want to direct negativity at Master Duel. It's more so I want to direct more positivity at the TCG, is the way I want to look at it. It's not that I don't want to play Master Duel, it's more like I want to play TCG more. You know what I mean? And I think that's a better way to put it. You know what? These formats, these cards are going to be coming to Master Duel eventually, and then maybe Master Duel is also going to be awesome.